Welcome, everybody, to this week's edition of the Liberty First Foundation Roundtable for the week. Can't even remember the date.
Today is
16th of
September 16th.
September 2022. Can't even remember the date. Yeah, it's pretty bad.
Yeah.
So, welcome, everybody. Here we talk about various things, happenings in politics and across the nation. We also touch on various things that we are seeing, trends and stuff that we see happening across the nation. So, with that, we encourage everybody that's watching to join in on the conversation. We welcome your comments. And with that, I'll go ahead and let everybody introduce themselves. I'm Mike Marshall.
Jeremy Bishop. I got nothing today. just plain me. It's been a long day. I'm tired.
That's funny. Well, I'm Mike Voss, and political commentator, 15 years, major Second Amendment advocate, and currently pissed off at the lack of any kind of plan from leadership at federal, state, and local levels. That leaves you, Mayor.
And I'm Frank Johnson, the incumbent mayor of Martha's Vineyard. Yeah, that's
Well,
I could just imagine that as being my official title. Holy Christmas.
one of the big things in the news, besides Martha's Vineyard, is credit card companies are now coding any firearm related sales that happens through credit cards. And this is supposed to reduce violent crime or gun related
Criminals use credit cards to buy the guns they're going to.
Oh, yeah.
It's going to incite late night door knocks. It's what it's going to do.
It's insane.
Well, all right, we have this thing that's been, the credit card companies, Visa, MasterCard, have been pressured by various gun groups to try and put a merchant code on. And they got this European organization that does all this, I guess it's the United Nations of credit card funding, where they're the ones who designate what codes go on this and that and everything else. And all of these credit cards decided that they were going to put a code on for gun shops. Now, it's not to say that the gun shop knows that the credit card company is going to have a list of what you bought, as much as they're just going to have a list of what the total that you're spending is. Now, Visa, I guess, heard
Visa
the
got
uproar.
pissed about it.
Well, Visa heard the uproar after they lost a 3.1% market share in Visa stock on the market this past week, and issued a statement saying that tracking gun sales is a very slippery slope. They're not going to do it. They don't want no part of it. They believe that, anything that's purchased that's a legal commodity, legal item, is yours to purchase. You've earned your credit. They're there to facilitate the sale. They're not going to stand in the way. They're not going to track it. They're not going to report it, not going to record it. But they still adopted the code.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to get something on that code. It's language you and I are never going to see. It's going to be what goes back and forth between the banks as you make statements, and whatever the government is going to figure how are they going to track it.
That's the key.
All right, they're going to track. Now, a lot of people are in uproar about that. There's a couple of very simple ways around it if you're concerned about these things. The first thing that you can do, and it's not exactly something that everybody can do, if you're going to go make a purchase of firearms or ammunition, use cash. That's the first thing that you can do. That's the first safeguard that you have, is that you do still have the ability to use cash. Another thing that you could do when you go to one of these cards, now it's going to put up the flag because you're purchasing it at the store. You could buy a gift card from your FFL in the amount of whatever it was that you intended on spending on that firearm, that ammunition, the bulletproof vest. You'd say whatever it is that you want to buy. Go into the merchant, buy a gift card from that store. And in some cases, the gift cards will actually offer you some sort of a benefit for using it. They'll give you a little bonus or something. And then put that on your credit card. And then turn around, use the gift card to purchase whatever it is. This way, now that can't be tracked because it's on a separate merchant receipt. They can't track that. There's no way they'll be able to track it. They know you spent money there, but they can't track it. The other thing to do, and I've been giving this some thought because these are things that I all saw coming down the line one way or another. The other thing you can do is go into your FFL that you want to purchase, whatever it is. Say you're going to buy $1,200 gun, your ammunition, all the rest of that stuff. Buy $1,200 worth of T-shirts and hats from the merchant, and let them ring it up. Run that through your credit card. You just bought a bunch of hats and T-shirts. Turn around and say, I'd like to exchange all of these items that I just purchased. Now that goes on an exchange receipt that's not reported to your credit card, because now that's an in-house transaction that's being used at the register that's not going to be tracked. The safest thing you can do if you cannot afford to purchase with cash, stop at your local gas station, buy a prepaid Visa or MasterCard. If you know how much you're going to spend, go into there, buy a prepaid Visa or MasterCard, charge it at the gas station or at the supermarket, wherever you want to go, and then take that card into your FFL, place it on the counter with your purchase, let them deduct the entire amount from that, and it's not by anybody's name. Now the government has absolutely no record of you even stepping foot in the FFL. They'll know that you bought $1,500 worth of gas at your local Shell station, but considering the prices of gas where Sleepy Joe's put them lately, that's really not that far of a stretch.
Mm-hmm.
So these are just a couple of things that you can do if you want to safeguard yourself and have your anonymity, so that if you're concerned about the government buying it. Now, remember just one thing. The feds already know when you buy a gun because you have to go through a NICS check.
Yeah.
They already know that you're buying a gun because you're getting a background check done, because there is no such thing as a loophole. You have to do a background check. Yes, leftist, it's true. There is no loophole. You have to go through a background check. They might not know what gun you purchased, but they know two things. You had a background check, and they know the number of firearms that you purchased, because if you buy two firearms and have it on the same NICS check, you can expect a visit from your state police along with an ATF agent wanting you to verify that you still are in possession of the two firearms that you purchased, because they're afraid of straw purchases. And when they do show up at your house, you tell them, come back with a warrant, and then close the door. And that's my little rant for today on how you can protect yourself from government intrusion and overreach by using a few simple steps.
Well, here is the other big issue on this. Okay. And a lot of what you said will eliminate this. But one of the big things that I can see happening with this is at some point making it so that you cannot purchase any firearm related item with a credit card, because once they have that code, they can start denying credit card purchases for that code.
Right. And when that happens, there's always another alternate route. The one credit card company that you notice may have been missing from this was Discover, which is neither a Visa or MasterCard. Discover was not involved in this thing. Now, I don't know exactly where American Express was with this thing. I don't remember reading about American Express. But if you want to jump through the hoops and you want to clear the hurdles, go buy a bunch of American Express traveler's checks with your credit card and use the traveler's checks to buy your stuff.
But here's the thing.
Traveler's checks to cash them in for cash, and then use the cash to go buy your stuff.
But here's my bigger problem with it all. It isn't, we're talking about the ways to get around what the government's doing. We're talking about the ways that we can work the system and the loopholes that they've put into the system.
Yeah, this
My bigger
this
problem
isn't
is
a credit
that this
card
is-
specific day.
this
It's all credit cards.
Right. Well, I think Michael's video keeps freezing, but I think the point he's trying to make is we shouldn't have to be jumping through these friggin' hoops
really
because the
wasn't
government
about
credit cards
tracking
have
the-
they have no place doing this in the first place. They have no place doing it in the first place. However, that never stopped government from doing something anyway. They never had a
Hang
place
on,
doing
yes.
a lot of things, but they keep doing it. So if they're going to do it, we got to keep twisting it around and making them show how ridiculous their efforts are by just figuring out different ways on how to get things done. You can try to limit freedom all you want, but patriots will find a way around it. And eventually one day we'll have enough and that day will come.
Hang on. I think one second. I think the system kicked me. Well, I think Facebook or one of the systems kicked me for a second. So I don't know if you guys got to hear my question or my statement, which is this isn't about tracking. This isn't about knowing which guns you have. This is about instilling a fear and a chill of Americans exercising their Second Amendment rights. This is taking average Joe and saying, we're putting yet more hurdles, more burdens in front of you, and more fear of government repercussions on top of you for exercising a God-given right that is a cornerstone of our nation. That's the bigger problem for me, is that
Right.
they are trying to take the average person in either through fear or through obstacles, prevent them from doing something that is absolutely a right and not the problem. Because not one criminal has any concern about any of this. Not one crazed, demonic terrorist or individual who's out of their mind. Anyone who decides that the only answer they have is to take the life of an innocent human being, they are not being concerned by any of this. This is absolutely about taking away individuals' rights and suppressing and oppressing us.
You said a point of what I was just about to say, or was going to follow up with, is if they categorized abortions on credit cards and did something like this with that, they would be freaking out about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
American Express, Frank, is listed on there. I just wanted
Now, I want to.
I was checking that while I was listening to Vass. I was trying to find the statement from Visa where they said they weren't going to be complying with any request to track the sales.
Okay, I want everybody to understand something. Okay, let me go ahead and share this so that you can see it. Because this isn't credit card specific. Okay, so this isn't specific to Visa, MasterCard, Discover, or any of this. This is from the IOS, the International Organization for Standardization. They approved a new merchant category code, or MC, banks will use when processing transactions for guns and ammunition stores. Okay, so this is beyond the credit card companies. This is a standardization or a standard code that they are going to start using. Visa's raised some alarms, and right here it says the problem Visa says is when it processes transactions for any merchant, it doesn't have access to data showing what products consumers are actually buying. That means the network and its banking partners would have no idea if a consumer is buying an automatic rifle or safety equipment at these stores. We have no visibility into what items a consumer is purchasing. This is true irrespective of which MCC applies to that merchant.
Yeah, but here's the thing. Why are we letting an international agency or operation be concerned about trying to categorize or chill an American cornerstone? We're the only nation in the world that fundamentally requires or allows and has a mandate for every citizen to be armed. We're the only nation. And
Well,
we have an international organization saying, hey, here's the way that we would like to do this around the world so no one can go anywhere in the world and buy these things. I don't care if they can't buy the guns, firearms in England or in France or in Australia, Canada, Mexico, like we do here. I could care less what their coding is or whether they approve of this or not. I could care less if the UN says that they approve of this or not. They have nothing to do with our Constitution, and therefore they should have nothing to say about this, especially when it is chilling our rights as American citizens. It is instilling fear of our government, and it is denying people the opportunity to make a personal individual choice.
Well, you made the statement, Michael. You said, how are we allowing it? Well, what are we supposed to do? We don't control them. All of the control of these financial institutions was signed over to multinational organizations decades ago. Had no say in the matter unless we were shareholders. And if we were, believe me, we were the peons. We would have the little minuscule bullshit that nobody was going to listen to anyway. They're going to do what they want to do, regardless of what we say. The only thing that we could possibly do is, all right, what do we do? Okay, well, let's ask our illustrious Congress people and Senate people to step in. All right.
Yes.
We're talking about a useless bunch of morons. And I don't care how far to the right or left they are not going to do a damn thing because, again, once you solve a problem, you outlive your usefulness. They like the problem to be there because then we have to come a calling and then we have to come a donating. Now, if you want to really have an impact on this, you have an organization like the National Shooting Sports Foundation or the NRA or any of these big buyer outlets where the distribution outlets for firearms are concerned, and you have them all petition FFLs throughout the United States to say, listen, how about we all say we're only going to take Discover and Diners Club for now for gun purchases in our store. We're not going to honor Visa or MasterCard.
How about, well,
I know it'll never happen. I know it'll absolutely positively never happen. We're never going to get the call. You can put 10 people in a room, all love Chinese food, and not one of them wants to go eat Chinese because nobody could ever agree on anything. And nothing's going to come of it.
I understand, but maybe the answer is, and yeah, maybe we petition as American citizens, not to the government because it's useless. We go to the businesses and we say, guess what? Come up with another code that's a blank code. I don't know what the code says, miscellaneous purchase, whatever it is. And you run, and I will only buy my products from you or any of the FFLs if you have this blank code that does not reveal any information to the credit card company for them to categorize it and put it over to the government.
Right. And that's exactly, and that falls exactly into the solutions that I offered at the top of the program.
It does. And I'm not
except you're not giving the store the opportunity to do that. You're doing it on your own.
Yes.
You're doing it on your own and not giving the store the opportunity. Now, me personally, I would rather see every gun owner, gun buyer, ammunition buyer in the United States just say, you know what, screw it. I'm not using the Visa or MasterCard, and frig them because they lose the 3% on every sale that they make. And when you start hitting them in the pocket, that's when they start waking up and they start doing the right thing. Now, Michael read part of the statement from Visa earlier where it said we have no visibility into what the consumer is purchasing. The last line in that paragraph was, many are advocating the use of MCCs to track gun sales as a potential tool in combating gun violence. That is not what merchant codes are designed for, nor should they be. So Visa's pushing back a little bit, but they still adopted the code. Yes. So until they refuse the code, you have to refuse to use the card. And if you're going to use the card, use it for something innocuous by going and buying a goddamn gift card and then use the gift card to go buy your guns. Because then they have no way of tracking who just used that gift card.
Well, I'm not disagreeing with you, Frank. I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm trying to impart to anyone who may be viewing this, and definitely to everyone in the credit card companies and our government,
Oh,
that
they got
we
it.
need to shut this down. That we need to stop this momentum.
Are you on Wi-Fi, hon?
We can hear you, Frank. We can't see you.
Yeah.
I muted him.
Well, here is one of the big issues on this. Okay, this is actually was being pushed by some world forum. I think it was the World Economic Forum, but I'm not positive about that. It may be the UN, or somebody else up there. But it's being promoted by one of these world governance organizations. Okay, and what really brought it
Yeah, I'm
forward
ready to show. We got no
here
Wi-Fi.
in the United States was the SEU, okay, or affiliated bank, and they're the ones that own the SEU credit union, and they're the ones that really started pushing this and started promoting it with the anti-gun politicians. And then the anti-gun politicians started putting pressure on the big credit card companies in order to get this pushed through. Okay. The ISO standard that was put up, that was actually set by one of these world governance agencies. And then they started the push to get it adopted for use here in the United States. That's when it started.
I'm
And
back.
the way it looks,
I just got back. Cat.
this is a merchant code that's assigned to an individual merchant. So it doesn't matter what you buy from that merchant. If they sell guns, that MCC code is assigned to that merchant. It's not assigned to the purchase. Okay. So any transaction that merchant makes, that code will be registered on that.
It's still
okay. So it could be, you could go in and buy a T-shirt from a shop that sells guns. Okay, like Runnings. Runnings is a farm store. They happen to sell guns, so their MCC code will be this code because they sell firearms. So if you go in there and you buy horse feed, it's going to register that you bought something at a merchant that sells firearms.
All right. Now, I have an account at Academy Sports. Academy Sports sells just about everything under the sun, from athletic wear to firearms, ammunition, and all the rest of that stuff. Now, I've got my Academy Sports credit card. It is neither a Visa nor MasterCard. It is the merchant's brand credit card. I don't know whether or not that card is going to fall under that reporting.
No, the card won't fall under that. It's only transactions at the physical location. Okay, and right here it says, okay, categorize gun shop sales. Okay, so Walmarts that still sell firearms, which I know there are a few in some locations, will also have this code. So anything you buy at a Walmart at those locations will have this code.
Well,
okay. So if you bought a gallon of milk, it's going to register that you bought something at this.
Well, that's
okay. So it does nothing. It does absolutely zero.
Right. Well, one of the things I was going to suggest is, if we know for a fact that large firearm outlets that deal enough where they have their own branded credit card, whether it's Academy Sports or Bass Pro Shops or anything else like that, if you're a consumer and you buy firearms through these organizations a lot, maybe it would do you a little good to apply for one of their in-house credit cards and then use that for your purchases rather than something else.
It's still going to register. Okay.
Yeah, but it's going to register as, but like Bass Pro Shops, if they're registering at the cash register, how do they know whether I bought a fishing pole or a rifle?
And that's it, exactly.
Right. So that's what I'm saying.
That's my exact point. Okay, you could go to a Bass Pro Shop who is going to be assigned this code, and you buy hip waders, and it's going to show that you purchased something from a gun shop.
Well,
Right.
here's
Well,
the
my point is to I don't care about the code. My point is to take the money from Visa and MasterCard.
well,
Don't give
Visa
them
and MasterCard do those store cards.
But here's my bigger problem, because what you're talking about, Mike, if we are understanding this correctly, and it is a blanket code over anything under the sun in that location, then this is the government or these are institutions that are trying to push, and this is definitely coming from government and certain political preference organizations that are trying to signal businesses to target. So it's not just on the consumer that they're trying to chill. They're chilling businesses from even maintaining the product for people to buy. And again, it comes back to this is chilling our rights by taking away the option of the choice. So again, it's an affront to the Second Amendment, and even probably a worse kind of situation, because it gives the illusion of freedom of choice. It gives the illusion of freedom of our rights, and it's removing that by denying us that potential option. It's putting the pressure on the business, say, I'm not going to carry that. It's too much of a problem. And again, our response should be both, one, as consumers, to reject that, two, to go to our legislative leaders at local, state, federal levels and say, don't do this, reject this, refuse this, and impose a penalty on Visa, MasterCard, impose a penalty on these organizations that are pushing this objective, because they can't infringe on our rights like this. We need kind of civil action, civil disobedience.
I'm concerned that this wouldn't even stand up to legal muster if we were to challenge it.
Oh, it would.
Legislation.
But here's the thing, okay? And it actually hasn't been any legislation on this. This is a voluntary effort by the credit card company.
Right. I'm talking about legislation.
But here's what can happen. Here's what can happen. Jan, your attorney general could file criminal charges against Visa and MasterCard for conspiracy to deprive rights, or conspiracy for deprivation of rights. It's
while he looks that up, this whole thing just echoes. It's the same idea, Fast, you kind of touched on, making the stores not want to sell that product, but it's kind of an echo to them talking about wanting to make people have to have gun insurance, and then making gun insurance illegal in that state.
Or too expensive for any particular individual to actually afford that insurance.
Yeah.
This is on so many levels, and we're just going over it, and we're not lawyers. None of us are lawyers. So imagine what a lawyer could do if they want to manipulate this to try and find a way to engineer it to chill the Second Amendment. At every level, this is about stopping law-abiding citizens. 99.994 of 165 million gun owners telling them, you're the bad guy, you're evil, and we're coming after you.
Well, I think as far as the insurance thing goes, I think a few years back, SCOTUS already filed a warning shot in that direction, where they said, it had something to do with, they were trying to regulate ammunition, and they said the ammunition is a component of the firearm. It falls under the Second Amendment. You can't have one without the other. You can't say, okay, you can buy a gun, but you can't buy ammo. And at one point or another, one of the justices, I forgot which one it was, said, we're not going to have a discussion about insuring people requiring insurance for their First Amendment rights.
Yeah, but
why would we have a discussion about having people insure a different one?
But the problem is, it's something that they've tried.
No, they didn't try it. They've done it in California, I believe it was San Francisco. It was one of the cities in California that has, in fact, matter of fact, I believe it was San Francisco, has in fact passed ordinance at the local level that says you must have insurance to be able to have a firearm. They've actually already passed it. It's going to the courts.
It's going through the courts. It's going to be 6 years before it reaches the Supreme Court.
Exactly.
Right, so the
minimum 6 years. Actually, it's minimum 7. By the time it goes through the entire appellate process, it's a minimum of 7 years.
All right, but we already know that when it gets there, according to the language that the SCOTUS has used in the past about requiring insurance to exercise your rights is not you, because they tried to liken it to, well, if you have a vehicle, you have to have insurance. But you don't have a right to a vehicle. Having a vehicle is a privilege. Having a driver's license is a privilege. It's not necessarily a right. It's not in the Constitution. You know, they didn't say, oh, well, you want a horse and buggy, there you go. No, there's a difference between privileges and rights. A driver's license is not one of them.
Okay.
Second Amendment is one of our rights. Now, they pretty much said, we're not going to have you to carry insurance to be able to speak your mind. Why would you have to have insurance to exercise a different one of your rights? Because if that's the case, then there's nothing that they can't demand that you insure.
That's my point. That's where
if they knew they could get away with it, they would be doing it across the board. But they know they can't get away with it, so they're just gonna do these little test drops in the little puddles before they go trying to throw it into the ocean, and before they see if they can get a ripple out of it. They want to see it float, and it's.
I want to come back to something. Okay, so Jan said, yes, my AG fights so hard in reference to Jeremy's thing that he put up. Okay. Title 18, USC 241 is civil rights conspiracy. Okay. Second Amendment is considered a civil right. It is a protection of a right. Okay. In most state constitutions that do provide a Second Amendment type protection, it is generally listed under civil rights. In New York State, in their civil rights code, they have verbatim the Second Amendment with one change. Instead of shall not be infringed, it says cannot be infringed. Okay, so firearms ownership, okay, or arms ownership, period, is classified as a civil right. Okay. Title 18 USC 241 is a conspiracy against right. Section 241 makes it unlawful for two or more persons to agree to injure, threaten, or intimidate a person in the United States in the free exercise or enjoyment of any right or privilege secured by the Constitution or laws of the United States, or because of his or her having exercised such right. Okay, so they are working to intimidate us into not being able to exercise our right to purchase a firearm. As such, they are in violation of this code, and your AG could file suit against them. Okay, and actually could charge the CEO of Visa and MasterCard, American Express, and the people that are urging this under this section.
You know what's getting me, guys? I cannot separate this latest action without looking at the red flag laws, the movement now to weaponize and to monetarily incentivize the use of the red flag laws, which is the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act. And now we're seeing these laws, like in New York State, everywhere is considered a public safety zone.
Yeah, a sensitive area.
Yeah, and then we're looking at this attack on gun purchases. And when you combine all of these things, we are looking at a multi-pronged attack on the Second Amendment, on our rights. And in every single one of these, and most of them will get struck down eventually. But the point is, you're being demonized.
It'll be after the damage is done.
It's all after the damage is done. This is teaching a younger generation to never be armed or else. And at the same time, we have Joe Biden running around screaming that if you dare question this, if you dare have a complaint about this, well, then you're evil, you're a domestic terrorist, you're an extremist. How dare you? And you are the problem. We are literally walking lockstep into 1930s Germany. I do not use that to over sensationalize it, but these are the steps that you, in any example I can think of, where authoritarian rule takes place, it is preceded by these kind of steps: fear, prosecution, targeting of individuals as others that are less than equal or human or worthy, and then disarming those individuals either through mandate or just outright confiscation. And then you go into the next stage, which is outright authoritarian rule, which brings us to, and the best example, I use it a lot, it's recent, Venezuela, which has killed its own people, according to the New York Times, and is continuing to kill its own people because first they made the promise, they took the guns, and then they killed their own people, and their people are starving. This is a terrifying, when we look at this, and I know the news media wants us to look at it as just one thing. It isn't. And people need to realize this isn't just this law. It's all of these laws, all of these actions. They're all going towards one direction. And that direction does not increase freedom, does not increase personal safety. It makes things authoritarian.
Well, I'm going to give you all this conjecture we talk about with the credit cards, and they're going to chill this and chill that. And we don't know where it's going to go yet. We don't know where it's going to go. But I can tell you something that we do know where it went, and the media has not reported on it at all. A couple of weeks back, if we all remember, we were talking about how they, Governor Windbag, whatever, what's her face with the chick with the speed, the wind tunnel face, painted on eyebrows. Yeah, that chick. Yeah. I won't even dignify her with a name because she just disgusts me in every way possible. But in their attempt to make New York as sanitary as possible when it comes to purging you of your rights while allowing people to get murdered in the streets all day, they paint all the areas in New York, the quote unquote sensitive areas, X amount of feet from a school, X amount of feet from a church. No subway, public transportation. There was the big one, which was Times Square. Times Square. Do you know that the NYPD this week sent out a letter to the residents of every area that has been deemed a sensitive area and didn't tell them, oh, by the way, you might have heard there's some new gun things going on and we want to make sure that your rights are preserved or anything? No. They sent a letter to residents in areas that said, you have until such and such date to surrender your firearms.
No, I missed that. I didn't see that.
Oh, yeah. The NYPD sent out a letter demanding that if people do not surrender their firearms, they're going to be in violation of the new New York Safe Act version 2 of the new fire. And they were very careful. They were very careful in how they worded the letter to say, you have until such date not to turn in your handguns. No, your firearms.
See, that's interesting.
Rifles, shotguns, handguns, even those that have been grandfathered in from the days before you were required to have a permit to have a long gun in your home. The NYPD sent out a letter saying that they have to surrender their firearms under penalty of law.
And you know what else they did? It was Eric Adams that came out, and remember 2 weeks ago, Illinois went out and did a compliance check on 1,000 people, 1,027 people, and 300 of them, miraculously, 1 in 3, were violation of red flag laws, had their firearms stripped, and Illinois got paid by the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, which is what it's there for, commoditizing people. New York State, and in particular New York City, said they were going to do the same thing. And Eric Adams suggested they're going to knock on every single door of every firearm owner and their neighbors to do that same kind of compliance check that was just done by Illinois. Now, after that, with what you're saying right now, with the letter.
See your papers, please. You don't have the authority to knock on somebody's door for a compliance check.
Exactly.
But don't have come back with a fucking warrant.
Yes, but put that in combination. Again, these aren't isolated things. So put that in combination with a letter from the police saying you have to surrender your
well, see, my point a few weeks ago when we were discussing this was by having all of these sensitive areas, we went back talking about how about a decade ago in Florida, there was a strip of land in Florida, X amount of miles long. Mm-hmm. They made it illegal for anybody who was a sex offender to live within 1,500 or 2,000 feet of a school. Of land was narrower than the furthest distance that you could live in. The schools are placed in such a way that no matter where a sex offender was, he couldn't live or she couldn't live anywhere in that stretch of land because wherever they would have lived, they would have been in violation.
Right.
The ACL took the city to court and had it reduced to like 1,000 feet so that there could be little pockets where these rapists could live. All right. Because they said, well, you can't make it illegal for somebody to live everywhere. They have to be able to live somewhere. So the ACLU won a suit so that sex offenders could live within X amount of feet. They reduced it. Now,
I suggest Alcatraz.
Right. The point of my argument was by having all of these sensitive areas, they have deemed that people who want to live in those areas have to voluntarily acquiesce their rights in order to live in those areas. And then people say, well, it's Times Square. It's only Times Square. It's a tourist trap. It's this and that. Well, here's the interesting thing about Times Square. There's 1,553 apartments currently up for rent in Times Square and another 50,000 that are already occupied.
Right.
That's not including all the condos that are owned in Times Square or in the surrounding areas that are in the sensitive zones. That's not including all the penthouses or the other apartments, the private industries that are there. I know of at least 6 different security companies that provide armed guards that are in those areas.
Yeah.
You're basically telling all those people who live there now, you either give up your rights or you have to move. Or you go to jail. Those are the 3 options that they have. Now, I don't know. Well, people in New York, listen. I know it's cute. It's fashionable. Oh, I live in New York City. Oh, I live in New York City. Stop letting people take your rights away. Stop volunteering your rights away because you want to take somebody else's rights away. Because one day, those rights that you gave away are rights that you're going to want back, and there's not going to be anybody there to give them to you because you gave them away. Stop the bullshit and get rid of this ridiculous governor that you got there.
Here's what literally happened this past weekend in the community I live in. Battle of Plattsburgh reenactments halted by gun legislation.
Really?
New York State's new concealed carry legislation, which went into effect September 1st, is preventing the Battle of Plattsburgh reenactors from carrying and using their antique firearms in sensitive locations like museums and other public areas that are restricted from general public access for a limited time or special event.
I never thought about the fact of them taking all the firearms and replicas out of museums.
No, because it's
Oh well, no. Those are under the control and dominion of the city, and the city can do whatever the hell it wants to do because they're above the law.
I feel like they'll find a way.
Now they might want to take them away so nobody is scared of them, so nobody gets spooked when they see a picture of George Washington with a blunderbuss. They don't want to give anybody post-traumatic stress disorder by seeing it. And they've also I got emails this week because I attend the gun shows up in New York.
Yeah.
At least 7 different gun shows in New York, in northern New York and in the southern tier, all canceled their seasons. 7 different gun show circuits canceled their seasons because of that, because of this new law. It's not only affecting people's rights, it's affecting people's livelihoods. There are people that they make a living selling and dealing, manufacturing, shipping, whatever. There is a whole chain of people that are being affected by this kind of legislation. And they don't give a damn about it. All they care about is their utopia.
Here's one question that we need to really start asking. Why is there such a huge push to disarm America?
I told you, it gets us down. It's a railroad path to an authoritarian state. Literally, it's not a conspiracy theory. It is a logical consequence of what we are seeing. And we have seen this historically, nation after nation, every time. It is a railroad. It drives you to one ultimate conclusion.
Well,
That's the answer. I can say I can't see another logical answer. Yes, they'll couch it in the thought of, oh, we're going to make you safe, except that it doesn't affect any criminal. And as we see from gun crime and crime in general, it's having zero impact on the criminals. And it has never had an impact on criminals.
The strictest laws to be enacted have been enacted in the last, 5 years? And right now, gun crime is at a 40-year high.
40 years. It's never worked. It's never effective.
Right. Well, on the bright side, spoke to Mr. Dick Heller day before yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if anybody realized this, but Dick won a very silent victory on behalf of the Second Amendment in conjunction with the law in Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. has had a 10-round capacity magazine restriction, but also on top of that had a 20-round capacity for the individual. So not only could you have only 10 rounds maximum in one magazine, you were only allowed to have 2 magazines, meaning the one in your gun and the one that you carry as a backup. Okay. Now, all those people that have a gun like the Walther PPK that only has 7 rounds in the magazine and they carry 2 extra in their pocket because it's a 380 and well, there's 21 rounds, you're a felon. Well, in light of the New York State Rifle and Pistol Association law, again, that went up against with Bruin, the police commissioner in D.C. decided that without any legislative need to do so, the likelihood now of their restriction being overturned would tantamount cost the city too much money to fight. So they lifted the restriction because more than likely, because Dick came in, he said, hey, listen, by the way, you saw that Bruin thing? Here's my new lawsuit. Suck it.
Well, here's the thing, and here's the reason why.
And they folded.
Here's the reason why they folded. The reason why they folded is because the Supreme Court weighed in on this and actually caused that law to be revoked. Then it would have had to happen nationwide. This way, only D.C. loses that law. Until another law is challenged someplace else, they stay in effect.
Well, that's the thing. Well, they did it 2 reasons. One, they weren't going to win the fight. It was going to cost too much money to take that fight on, and they knew they were going to lose. And the last thing they wanted to do was have Dick Heller have another victory in the Supreme Court against DC, and then because that would then be used as the precedent to set for the magazine restrictions and capacity restrictions. And
that's the thing. That's why New York City changed its law about concealed carry outside of the city.
Yeah.
Okay, because they were getting sued, and if they didn't, then that was going to happen. And that's why the Supreme Court had to actually they refused hearing that case because the case ended up becoming moot because New York City had changed its law.
Well, I figured I would bring that up because with all of the doom and gloom that we always wind up talking about, we very rarely get an opportunity to speak about the victories that we have. So,
very true.
So, Dick Heller, on behalf of us, your friends here at the Liberty First Foundation, once again, you have proven yourself to be the dude. You are the dude.
He is the dude.
We need to get him a shirt that says like Heller to DC 0.
Yeah, right.
I'm sure Dick's got a closet.
Actually, he has a lot more cases that have been dropped than just those.
And it still just scares the hell out of me because here we are, people in the Second Amendment community that follow this stuff, almost religiously because it's our job to do. We know who Dick Heller is.
Yeah.
We know him. Why? And it baffles and befuddles me how there's so many people within the Second Amendment community who have absolutely no idea who Dick Heller is.
Don't.
What he stood for. As far as I'm concerned, whenever I'm with Dick Heller, Dick will never pay for a meal.
No.
Wherever we go out, we'll go out for burgers. He really likes Five Guys. That much he likes Five Guys burgers. He likes the one that's out in Vegas. Whenever Dick wants to go out and have burgers, he knows it's on me. Dick's carte blanche. He's good to go. He's golden.
He loves Whataburger too.
Yeah.
Well, you know why the problem is that so many people, they don't know because we see so many people, whether it's Second Amendment community or anything else, they just follow headlines. They look at the news snippets and they don't actually look at the bills. They don't listen to the full conversations. They don't pay attention to anything that's longer than 3 minutes. And that's the problem.
I ask people that supposedly support the Second Amendment, I ask them, does the name Dick Heller ring a bell? Or do you know who Dick Heller is? They go, the name sounds familiar, but I go, have you ever heard of a case called DC v. Heller?
Well, listen, as Steve Bozick from Bear Arms always says, Dick Heller is to the Second Amendment what Roe was to abortion.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
It's that synonymous because his case is that landmark, that groundbreaking.
It is. It's that a huge landmark case.
However, one was enshrined in the Constitution and the other one wasn't. So that's the difference between the two. That's why the second will always stand, but it's going to be up to us to make sure that we keep defending it.
Well, we have to. We got to watch out for it because they've tried. I mean, even former Supreme Court Justice
Stevens
wanted to get rid of the Second Amendment. They can't. They know they can't get rid of it. So instead, they're just chipping away at everything about it, trying to chill.
Yeah.
And
Stevens said that the only way that quote unquote common sense gun laws would be able to be enacted was to repeal the Second Amendment.
Yeah. And since we can't do that, they're looking at every other way to stop someone, like stopping women from being able to defend themselves by pricing it out of their range, by taking up too much time to jump through all the loopholes.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, Michael, because those are the grounds that New York State is now standing on with trying to defend their new law. Because you heard in the Supreme Court argument about historical tradition.
Yeah.
That the Second Amendment is not only a right, but it's a historical tradition, all it is. They're turning around in New York City saying, well, it's also historical tradition that we weren't, that blacks, Native Americans, and women were not allowed to carry firearms. So we can use that as a means of defending our new legislation, because it's also based in historical tradition. So they're basically, New York State is coming out and saying we are going to deny the rights of minorities, Native indigenous peoples, and women, so that no one can have their rights.
Let me. They are so misinformed about history. So misinformed about history.
If they should look at why the NRA was founded.
Not all blacks were restricted from owning firearms. Okay, that happened way after slavery. At the founding of their country, and when the Second Amendment was enacted, if you were free black, you were actually allowed to own firearms.
Yeah.
Okay. In fact, some slaves even held firearms. Okay. That was one of the reasons why they were worried about some slave revolts, was because of blacks having firearms.
Yeah.
Okay. Because part of their duties was to protect the property that they were working. Okay. Women also prevalently owned firearms during the time of the enactment of the Second Amendment.
Derringer.
Okay. Most women carried firearms at that time.
Well,
okay. Indians carried, all the way through. I want them to show me a law, an actual law that was written at that time when the Second Amendment was enacted that actually restricted anybody from carrying a firearm.
Well, listen,
they will not find one.
The last thing we could ever expect is for leftists to get history right. These are the people that believe that, that Lincoln was a Democrat. The Democrats freed the slaves, and all the rest of the stuff. Now, I'm going to give you a perfect example of why. You know how we always talk about how the left always plays long ball, and why Republicans and conservatives are always behind the curve on this thing. Democrats play long ball. And I was sitting there looking, I was doing a little bit of research this week on this whole college loan fiasco that's going on here.
Yeah.
Prior to 1964, if you wanted a loan to go to college, you went to your local lending institution.
Right.
Private bank, and you went and you got your loan.
Yeah.
And you went to school, and your parents would put up part collateral in their house or whatever the case is, they'd co-sign, and that's how it was done. And you paid a basic interest rate, and you got your college loan, you went to school. In Johnson's administration decided that they were going to take over the college loan business, and that they were going to federalize it, and that they were going to make all these onerous restrictions and requirements for the college loans with the compounding daily interest rates and all the rest of that silly stuff. Now, I understand why people with college loans are so upset about it. And then in 1978, it was the Carter administration that decided that they were going to make the college loan program unforgivable through bankruptcy court. It was the only loan in America that you can't default on through declaring bankruptcy is a college loan. Now, why do I say that the Democrats and the leftists play long ball? Because they knew damn well that a time would come in America where the country would be so closely divided that they would need the ability to buy the votes. And what better way to tip the scales than be able to say, you know what, if we hold on to this card in our back pocket one day, when we got a couple of million people in this country that we need to vote for us that might be on the fence, we'll be able to buy their votes with their own money by forgiving their college debt. Let all the suckers pay for it. We'll get their votes and retain control. That is playing long ball, a 60-year plan to ensure that you would get votes.
I'm going to take it a step further, Frank. Under the Obama administration, all college student loans became federalized, as in they weren't being they were being paid by the federal government.
Right,
Okay?
and they rolled that
in
in.
other words, the loan came from the federal government.
And they rolled that into Obamacare. They rolled that into Obamacare,
Yes.
if you remember.
I remember they threw everything into Obamacare.
Right. Why did they do all of that? Because they knew damn well they'd be able to, at one point in the future, quote unquote, forgive those loans and buy votes and retain power. That's why they did it.
Here's the real interesting thing about it. If you remember also, right about that same time period as when they're transferring all student loan lending to the federal government is also when this outcry against or for the relief of student loans started.
Yeah. But I know we're talking about money. And since we're talking about money for a second, we're going to segue away or hard cut, how you want to look at it, because I know Jeremy wanted to talk about something that's kind of related in a way.
Yeah, it's kind of related. This is I love that shirt, Jeremy. It's a nice shirt. I got to get a couple more of them.
So take it away, man.
I was muted. So I'm going to be signing off here for a minute. We're not 100% there, but we are really excited to announce that we're starting our annual membership drive. Probably, I'd say within the next 2 weeks, right, Mike?
Yeah.
Okay. So in the next 2 weeks, starting our annual membership drive. And am I allowed to show what somebody in the new membership could get?
Well, before you do that, why not explain what a membership entails?
Sure.
Explain some of the benefits of membership in the loop.
So, exclusive content, access to information from us, exclusive interviews, video footage, as well as when we finally get some merch up, discounts on merch, and some specific vendors that we support and different manufacturers as well. So, one of our new 250 members to the Liberty First Foundation. Now, it's not completed yet, so I apologize, but somebody is going to have the joy of receiving as a complimentary gift for joining. This will be a custom engraved Henry Golden Boy 22 long rifle lever action rifle, and one of our new 250 members is going to receive that as a gift. So, great things coming for you. Great things coming for us, and we're excited to have everybody in our support, and we're excited to have everybody who has shown up and wants to continue supporting us. Sorry, I'm just trying to put the cover back on and make sure that you guys know how much we appreciate you. So I'd say within the next 2 weeks, you should be able to sign up for that.
And within the next couple of weeks, there's going to be video footage of Jeremy doing his very first gun review on the Range Report YouTube channel, as he is going to take that custom engraved rifle and do his own range review, introducing everybody to the beauty and perfection that is the Henry Golden Boy 22 long rifle.
Absolutely.
Well, Jeremy asked a very interesting question, of course, and Jeremy, go right ahead and take.
So, membership for the annual will be $15, and that's going to include everything that we talked about. Like plus we said, discounts on other vendors and merchandise that we'll be having, and exclusive content, as well as I believe Mike will be working on a couple of other things to offer exclusive members as well. Some other constitutional content, Mike?
Yes. Be sure to tune in tomorrow, because tomorrow, as everybody should know, September 17th is Constitution Day. And I will be doing multiple live streams throughout the day, reading the Constitution, discussing the Constitution, why it's applicable today as much as it was when it was written, and why we still need it today. We probably need it now, more so now than we did when it was originally written and ratified. So tomorrow, September 17th, stay tuned. Check back. Okay. Subscribe, set your alerts, everything. Because I'm going to be popping on throughout the day doing various discussions about the Constitution to celebrate Constitution Day.
And all new members of the Liberty First Foundation are going to be receiving newsletters periodically throughout the entire month. Within those newsletters are going to be contained a specific private link to the content that we're speaking of. There'll be private listed videos, private listed articles, different interview segments and information, along with coupon codes for various manufacturers, both in and out of the Second Amendment community, for various products that you could use, along with our own Amazon codes that you could use to, make purchases with. So we could save you a few bucks here and there. And we want to make sure that the people that follow us get something in return for not only the pleasure of hearing and watching us, but by helping us disseminate some of the information, because we've got some really big plans for the future. And the only way that we're going to be able to facilitate those plans is by having a broad base of membership subscriptions. And like I said, there's a lot of good organizations that are out there that do a lot of really good work at the federal level, but there's not a lot of organizations that do things at the local level. It's our vision here at the Liberty First Foundation to be able to enact change locally so that it drives a wave towards the federal. So if we can get local communities on board with some of the programs and policies that we want to craft and some of the programs that we want to institute, we hope that it'll have an infectious quality and we can spread those things throughout the communities locally, where we tend to feel that we have a more receptive audience. Because when you meet people one-on-one, you tend to find that you have more in common than you do that separates you. And if we can help enlighten people and educate them and make sure that their community is safe and better for it, and they understand their rights, we can promote that throughout the states. But to do that, we have to set up a membership program so that we can do the work that the big guys aren't doing. And that's what we're going to be. That's our future.
Some other exclusives that are going to be for paid members only. Is we're going to have some exclusive educational content that I will be producing on the Constitution. Also, we'll have some Second Amendment related educational content. And we will also, from time to time, have member exclusive question and answer sessions where members only will be invited to a webinar where they are free to ask questions of anybody that's there, okay, including some of our exclusive guests.
It's a lot. It's a lot, folks.
Yeah.
I mean, we want to make it value added. We want to make it inclusive. We want to make it something that's going to be benefiting you because you're benefiting us. It's mutually beneficial because you help us grow, you help us keep the lights on, and we want to help you keep your rights and freedoms. It works out well.
So
Absolutely.
So with that, I'm going to be the first to jump off camera because I just got a massive Charlie horse in my broken ankle, and I'm in a lot of pain right now. So I got to go. That's why I shut my camera off, because I was about to scream in agony while I was sitting here. My doctors are still trying to figure out why exactly I'm having the problems I'm having. What should have just been a simple injury turns out it was a little bit more complex than anybody had imagined. So I'm dealing with that. So that gives me a little more time to stay here and do things with you guys. So this is Frank from Liberty First Foundation and Range Report. And I'm going to tell you all, be safe and shoot straight. And I'll leave it to my compadres here to wrap up the show. You guys be safe. Love you. God bless.
Absolutely.
Hey, Jan, I will get in touch with you after the show in the next couple day or two. And we'll talk about how you can become more involved. There's
Absolutely.
you can do that don't require you to have a firearm or be able to get around with the vehicle. And we'll talk more about what you can do and how you can get more involved.
Yeah, and
absolutely.
You don't have to be a gun owner to be concerned about the Second Amendment. You don't have to be a gun owner to be concerned about your rights, your privileges, your life. And that's ultimately part of what we're talking about here. This is about you and your life. Don't feel like, well, but I don't own a gun. That's okay. You still have life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. You still have freedom and choice. That doesn't change anything else.
Well, the thing is, okay, if they take away our guns, how soon before they say, and there's a big push on it now, you're no longer allowed to drive. Okay, everybody must use public transportation.
Well, what else? If they get away with this, they take away anything and everything else.
Exactly.
There's
okay,
nothing
you're
to
no
do.
longer allowed to go to McDonald's and have a hamburger. Instead, you must eat this
Bugs.
gruel that is, quote unquote, highly nutritious for you instead.
Yeah, you're gonna eat bugs and be happy about it. Terrifying.
Okay. I mean,
slimy yet
we
satisfying.
need to quit thinking about the Second Amendment and these gun restrictions.
This is so much
as
more.
being just applicable to guns. Okay.
Yeah.
Guns are just a start. And the reason why they have to get rid of the guns is because some of the other stuff that they're planning to shove down our throats later, they won't be able to if we're still armed.
That's the reason why Japan was so terrified about waking up the sleeping giant. Just why would no one invade America? Because there's going to be behind every blade of grass. And, you know, if you can take that away, then you can take away everything. And that's one of the things that protects us around the world, is everyone knows the American people can defend themselves unlike any other nation in the world. And that's why it's so terrifying for some people who think that we need to get rid of the Democratic Socialists of America. Have made it very clear. BLM has put it in writing. They have told us that they believe we need to get rid of the Constitution. We need to have human rights. We have to have the UN make all the decisions. And in fact, you no longer are an American. You're being ruled by someone else. And that is terrifying if they can get away with that. And that's what we're trying to protect.
Well, we're witnessing right now what happens when an armed populace can stand against a world power. Okay? All we have to do is look at Ukraine.
Yeah. Yeah. Great example.
Civilians in the Ukraine have been armed. The tide in Ukraine has shifted. Russia is losing ground in Ukraine. And before, they were having a hard time stopping Russia. That has totally changed. Okay, we saw what happened to our own forces in Afghanistan and why we had to stay in Afghanistan for 20 years because the population was armed.
Well, yeah, it refutes the argument coming from Joe Biden that, oh, well, you need a cannon to fight. You can't fight against F-16 or F-15. Yeah, you can. Afghanistan, Ukraine. He knows, and the people writing his script for him, they know. The Second Amendment is incredibly powerful, and in terms of protecting liberty and freedom.
Well, we only need to look at our own history. Okay, a bunch of ragtag farmers stood against the most dominant world power and won a country, won our freedom. By all rights, we should have never been able to win the revolution. We were outmanned. We were outgunned. Okay. However, George Washington, and if you look at the history of the Revolutionary War, at the beginning, it looked like we were going to get our asses kicked. But George Washington took these ragtag farmers these militia members and changed the outcome of the American Revolution.
Yeah.
Okay,
Absolutely.
that's what an armed populace can do.
Gentlemen, I've got to say goodnight. I apologize.
It's all right.
Just remember, when seconds count, the police are minutes away. Have a good night. Be safe. Make sure you speak out for your rights.
Absolutely. All right,
Have a great
thanks.
night, Jeremy.
Night, guys.
Hey, Mike, there's one other thing I wanted to talk about tonight.
What you got?
And sorry that the other guys had to leave, but did you hear about the bill from Marco Rubio and Tony Gonzalez that came out today?
No, I did not.
Okay. I was speaking about it on my channel just a little bit, just sending back some text, and people were responding. It's that there's a lot of pushback. Essentially, Marco Rubio put out a bill. Matter of fact, I'll share it with everyone because I know almost no one. It was hard to find this for myself, so I'm sure others had trouble too. This is against fentanyl. It's about distributing fentanyl, the drug, and making it a death felony account. It's murder. If
Right.
you are dealing fentanyl,
So they're working on making it a capital offense.
it's a capital offense. And we're seeing many people on the left are pushing against this. I've had people tell me you can't do this because there are people who are addicted to fentanyl, and this is going to adversely affect their lives, which I think is insane. But here's the thing. So that's one aspect of it is people are saying, well, it's harsh for addicts. And so they say, well, you can't do that, which I don't agree with at all. But if you look at the bill, and this thing is short, this is short, sweet, and simple. It's barely 3 pages. And literally, it's really 1 if you did the spacing correctly.
Right.
This bill is as simple as if you deal fentanyl, you've committed a capital crime. Now, the question I would ask is, have we gone too far? There's the bigger question. It's not, are we being harsh to addicts? The question is this too much of a punishment? Is it violating the 8th Amendment because it's a capital offense? And when I look at it, and I'm listening to people, I still have to say, but fentanyl's killing how many Americans every year? We're at record highs in overdoses. Fentanyl's being put into every kind of illicit and illegal drug on the market, out on the streets. It is killing children. That is a fact. It is killing young adults. That is a fact. It's killing adults. That is a fact. And distributing drugs illegally is killing individuals and communities.
Okay.
Answer.
The first thing that we have to ask
Sure.
with this law, okay, and this is the first question every American should ask of every piece of legislation.
Mm-hmm.
Does Congress have the authority to enact this law?
Which is a good question, and I would say yes.
Okay, justify yourself.
One, because this would have to be voted on, so the representatives of the public would have the final say. They're the ones who are electing those representatives.
Okay. Beyond that, constitutionally, how would you constitutionally justify this law?
It doesn't violate the 8th Amendment because we're looking at something that it's murder. They are de facto creating murder.
Let me rephrase this. What constitutional authority does Congress have to enact this law?
The power to legislate? I'm not sure where you're going with it.
Okay. First off, Congress only has the ability to legislate in certain areas.
True.
Okay. All that's defined, Article 1, Section 8.
Right.
Can you justify this law using Article 1, Section 8?
I would have to say I would have to review Article 1, Section 8 again because I don't have it. I'm not familiar enough to say it off the top of my head.
Okay. I'm going to agree with you. Yes, they do have the authority to institute this law. The reason why they have the authority to institute this law is fentanyl is an interstate commerce issue.
Oh, you were using interstate commerce?
Interstate commerce.
That's funny because even though it's a illegal drug, but it is interstate commerce. That's true. It's even international. That's interesting. I never.
That's where Congress gets the authority to enact regulations against fentanyl.
Okay, yeah, because otherwise it would be isolated to any one state because
Exactly.
it's not state lines.
Okay.
Fair enough.
So
Okay,
so that's how we can justify that this law is actually authorized or can be authorized by Congress.
mhm, mhm.
Okay. Then we can look at, okay, does the enactment of this law violate any other principle of the Constitution? You
Which is
brought
what I
up
was
the Eighth
saying.
Amendment.
Yeah.
Okay. At one point, they did try to say that the death penalty was a violation of the Eighth Amendment. However, that has since been overturned. And also, if we look at the historical record, the death penalty has been enacted for much less.
Well, let's make sure everyone knows what we're talking about when we say the Eighth Amendment, because most people don't know which one that is. That's the unjust punishment. You
Yes.
cannot be punished beyond the severity of the crime you've committed. So when I say that it is justified under the Eighth Amendment, that means that since fentanyl does kill and kills in large numbers across the entire country, affecting people of every age range, every group, every ethnicity, it's not limited to a class of people. It is a threat to the nation, and it is a deadly threat, even in micromillimeters of usage. Therefore, it is justified that it is a capital offense. That's where my argument comes from. So that people,
and also that there's a lot of people that have claimed that any form of capital punishment is what am I trying? I'm drawing a blank.
unusual punishment.
Yes.
Mhm.
Okay. Basically equating it to a form of torture.
Yeah, John Fetterman is one of the big proponents saying that right now in Pennsylvania.
And if we actually look at the historical record,
Mhm.
okay, the death penalty was used quite often, both prior to us becoming a nation and well after we became a nation.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just used for cases of murder. Okay.
Rape. It was used for rape in the past.
It was actually used for theft.
Mhm.
It was used for desertion. It was used, I mean, there were countless crimes that were classified as capital offenses.
Right.
Okay. Depending upon the severity of the crime, obviously. But there were multiple crimes that fell as capital crimes. Okay. It wasn't just limited to murder, rape, and those type of crimes. Okay. There were theft. I mean, like I said, you can look at the historical record and you can see all these other criminal activities that were capable of being handed a punishment of death. Okay. Horse theft was a capital crime. I mean, like I said, there was a lot more.
Yeah. And
Okay.
this is historical world.
Today, most of our capital crime are limited to situations where death was caused under special circumstances.
Yeah.
Okay, is how most capital offenses are done. In this case, with a fentanyl dealer, I do think that threshold of special circumstances has been well exceeded.
I think so as well. Again, because it
Okay.
affects every
Because
class
more
of
often than
people.
not, any dealer that deals with fentanyl has caused multiple deaths.
Yeah. I think that's absolutely correct. And I think that's absolutely, I mean, it's factual, it's verifiable, it's empirical. And that's another aspect that I think is important. This isn't subjective. It's not, well, I think this. We have the numbers. We empirically can point to cases and examples and have very exacting numbers. And with a logical conclusion that the numbers may even be larger than we actually know of. So I think the threat is absolutely unquestionable. The reality of that threat is unquestionable. I think this is appropriate. And
No, I think
I
it
would even say,
absolutely is.
yeah, I
Okay.
would even go
But
further
this is
than the bill. I would say the death penalty is warranted, not just capital being put in jail for life, but capital punishment itself,
Mhm.
murder, death as a result.
Oh, I completely agree. Okay. And one of the reasons why I did this and challenged you on the constitutionality of this is I want everybody, when they're looking at this legislation, the very first question you should ask yourself is, does the legislative body that is working to enact whatever law it is, do they have the authority to enact such a law?
Mhm.
Okay. If that answer is no, then you should be fighting tooth and nail to stop that law, regardless of what it is.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Even if you agree with the law, you should be fighting against it.
Yeah. I think it's important people to realize that there are many arguments and there's a lot of thought that should be put into these laws, which is why I brought it up. And it's great to question me because do I have a basis? I love that you asked me why. And okay, and we can walk through. Here's the justification. Here's the cause. Here's the effect. This is what is the effect in terms of the greater good? And I think too few people, especially in the news media, actually have that conversation of here's the bill, and this is why it is legal, why it's worthwhile. Is it effective? Is it efficient? Does it have a consequence that makes sense? And no one ever says that.
Right. And this is actually what we should be requiring our representatives in Congress to do. Whenever a bill is introduced, regardless if it's introduced in the House or if it's introduced in the Senate, okay, or at our state level, whenever it's introduced in the legislature at our state level, okay, our representatives, the very first question that should be asked by every representative that is appointed to office is, do we have the authority to enact such a law? If they aren't asking that question, they don't deserve to be representing you.
I agree with that completely. Now, Jan brings up a great question here that she believes, or a statement that unfortunately it won't go anywhere as long as Democrats are in control. And that goes to the other thing that I heard, and the pushback I've gotten on this so far, and that's been saying, well, it's unfair to addicts. In fact, I had a very impassioned plea by a gentleman who said that this was about his father. His father's an addict, and he doesn't want his father to have to suffer through becoming sober because it makes it difficult for him to communicate and to be able to be with and around his family. And I understand that personal aspect, but this isn't about that one individual. This is about
No,
our society.
it's not about that one individual. And secondly, okay, we can actually have programs put in place to help these people that are addicted. Okay. And again, Congress would have the authority over that because they are enacting a law that justifies, that is dealing with interstate commerce. Okay. So, since they are taking something out that people have became addicted to, then it is also Congress's obligation to take care of those people that are being harmed by this new law.
Right. And I think that's
and
good.
actually these people that are quote unquote being harmed by this new law are in turn actually being helped by this new law. They aren't being hurt, they're being helped. The item that's being controlled under this new law is what's actually hurting them.
Right.
That's what we also have to take and look at and put into proper perspective.
I think so. That you can't, the best answer to addiction is sobriety. Helping to remove that temptation, helping to remove that impediment, that addiction is positive. Coddling people by saying, hey, let's give you more of that addiction, like these safe needle injection sites, these, when we see the Biden-Harris administration buying crack pipes and distributing that, you're not helping people with that. That's not a benefit to anyone.
You're enabling them.
Exactly. And it's absolutely
enablement is not help.
Exactly. The answer is we need to help remove that addiction, to end that addiction. And as difficult as that may be, to work on that process, you can't get there if you know, no matter what you're doing on one side, if you're
as
not,
long as the substance remains readily available, it will always have people that are addicted to it. Okay. So the first step that you have to do if you want to cut addiction is to remove the influence, okay, or the addictive substance, whatever that is. Okay. Until that is removed, you can't stop the addictive process.
no, here's a good question, because we know that there are political groups that are going to argue this, and they're going to argue it on the basis of compassion. They're going to argue this in the basis of freedom to use a drug. One of the arguments we hear is it's a libertarian idea that no, you can use any drug because it only affects you. There's the argument that we hear from a more progressive left-leaning point of view that, well, you have the right to use drugs. You have the right, and it's an imposition on your life. Are those constitutional arguments in your point of view? Because to me, that doesn't muster. It doesn't. Those arguments are incorrect because it doesn't just affect one person; it affects a society and a community.
That's what I was actually getting ready to point out.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so that argument's gone.
If it only affects you, you absolutely do have the right.
Absolutely.
Okay. But when that effect starts going beyond you and starts affecting your family, your neighbors, your work, your community, then it ceases being a right and starts becoming a burden.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And when it is a burden on society, then it's no longer a right.
Exactly.
Okay. And that's when we actually have to look at taking action to lessen that burden on society, because your rights don't trump the rights of somebody else.
Exactly.
Okay. So your right to use does not give you the right to become a burden on somebody else.
Yeah. And that's ultimately, that's the biggest argument. It's not about, because you can say, I'm being compassionate. No, you're not being compassionate. You're being, what's that word? Codependent, or
Yes.
it's enabling. And that is also a drag on society. It is affecting the community and the nation because of the scope of this. So again, it fails on that constitutional argument against it.
Now, I will guarantee, and it's already actually being done, is a lot of people are trying to use that same argument, the argument that I just used on drugs. They're trying to use it against the Second Amendment, i.e., your right to own a gun doesn't trump my right to life.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Okay. The thing is, gun ownership in and of itself is not a danger to society.
Right.
It is people that are the danger to society. It is people that are wrongfully using firearms.
Right. Like any other tool.
Appropriately using firearms that are actually the burden on society. It's not the actual ownership of firearms.
Right. Just like there are, according to Obama.
That's where we actually need to concentrate. That's where, and we've already got numerous laws that already address the misuse of firearms.
Yeah. 22,000 of them, in fact.
Okay.
And that's the thing people misunderstand. Even the Obama administration, when they, after Sandy Hook, did the report, which is also available by the CDC, 500,000 to 3 million defensive uses of guns protect American lives every year. Exactly. And that's equal to and actually exceeds all crime in the United States. So you can't say, oh, it just commits evil and violence. That's not a real argument. That is an emotional argument meant to manipulate you either on the lack of knowledge or your emotion to shut you down and allow them to strip away your rights, whether it's guns or whether it's illegal, illicit drug use like fentanyl. It's the same situation.
No, it's not.
No, in that their argument fails.
Mm-hmm. And that's what we've, another thing that we have to be mindful of. Okay. And that's where we need to really develop our critical thinking skills. Okay. Because people that support certain things, whether it be gun control or other types of deals, will try to justify it by saying, well, this or that. Okay. We need to start critically thinking, are those actually the same thing? It's just like licensing a vehicle and licensing firearms. They're two different things. Completely different.
Yeah. Rights versus privileges, the individual versus a community.
Okay. And actually, I could make an argument that licensing of vehicles is unconstitutional as well.
Harder. I've heard that argument before. Harder. But yeah, you can make it. But that as far as I know, is rooted in the thought that using a car isn't a privilege. It's a requirement of life today, modern life, which isn't accurate at all.
And actually, using a vehicle isn't a privilege. It has been made a privilege. Okay. But early on, it was classified as a liberty. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
The ability to use a vehicle was a liberty. Okay. Which equates to it being a right. Now, you don't have the right to be given a vehicle. You don't have the right to use any vehicle. However, you do have the right, if you have the means to obtain a vehicle legally and lawfully, to use that vehicle.
Right. You have that's like purchasing anything. You have the right.
Exactly.
Legal.
And that's where the lawfulness of licensing falls short.
It's an interesting argument. I've always heard it from a slightly different point. I can see that. It's a good argument. I don't think it holds up. I can see the argument. But again, it's very different than when we're talking about with firearms. It's very different than what we're talking about with drug use, because it doesn't come to the same standards. It
Right.
doesn't have the same impact.
Right. Okay. My owning a firearm doesn't affect anybody else.
Exactly.
Okay. It affects no one.
There is no prerequisite that it must. On top of it, not only does it not affect anyone, there's no prerequisite that it must affect others,
Right.
which is a big part.
Okay. And with drug addiction, it does affect other people.
As a prerequisite, it must affect other people at some point. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately, it always will affect another individual. It is a
Right.
prerequisite of that, which is where it fails in their arguments from the left. And people don't usually hear this, which is why I'm happy to have this is why I wanted to bring it up.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't think people ever hear this argument and they never think about it. It's like, no, it always fails because it always affects someone else. It must affect other people.
Right. And that's also where the abortion argument fails.
Yeah, because the baby is a life.
Okay. Yeah. The mother does have a right to bodily autonomy. However, her right does not trump the baby's right to life.
Mm-hmm. Which I agree with wholeheartedly. That baby is an independent individual and is by definition, the most innocent and defenseless of all American citizens.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, it is the obligation of government, our government, and pretty much
to protect that individual,
protect that innocent, defenseless life.
Mm-hmm.
And since it's the ultimate defenseless life, it deserves the ultimate of protection that we can provide.
Now, I'm going to challenge you on this, though.
Uh-oh. Here we go, folks.
Because there has been talk of a bill being introduced into Congress that would restrict abortions nationally after 15 months or 15 weeks.
Which comes to the
federal
question.
Government have the authority to enact such a law?
No.
Exactly. It does not. States can do it all day long.
Yeah.
The federal government does not. Okay. No. And the reason why is it does not classify as interstate commerce.
Right.
So that kills that authority. That is the only potential place where Congress may have authority over it. Okay. But it doesn't classify as interstate commerce until abortions start crossing state lines.
Which they're trying to do now in many states.
At that point, then, yes, it could qualify. Okay. But until that becomes the situation, the federal government has no authority over. Okay.
Right. Which is why it
remains an intrastate thing. Okay. So let's say they do enact. It would not have any authority on any abortions held, let's say New York once legalized abortions, okay, as long as it was a New York resident having an abortion within the state of New York, the federal government would not have authority over it.
Right, because it would still be within the state, therefore not crossing state lines, therefore federal government, which only starts its power the moment you cross another state line, would never be able to interact.
Exactly.
Which most people forget.
And that's the other thing that we have to understand. Okay. Mm-hmm. The federal government has no authority over intrastate commerce. Okay. Anything that happens within a state, the federal government actually has zero authority over it. It's only when it crosses state lines that the federal government can exercise some authority over things, and then that is limited based upon Article 1, Section 8.
Right. And, you know, it's interesting, Mike, because one, I love being challenged on my knowledge and making sure that I'm correct in what I believe in. And I think more people should do that.
Mhm.
It's never a bad thing to question, do you know what you think you know?
Right.
And is it the best thing? I mean, that's why we have the freedom of speech, to
Mhm.
try and
Exactly.
have these conversations, to try and understand the situation from multiple different viewpoints, and to come down to a conclusion that makes the most sense or is most effective and most efficient for the most number of people, so that we maintain as much liberty for every individual as possible.
Right.
That's why we need freedom of speech. That's why we need, especially in modern day, we need the internet. We need the access to social media to have these conversations. I mean, that's why at its initial creation, television was meant to educate. It was meant
Mhm.
to do exactly what we're doing right now, to
Right.
have conversations of high level import on the liberty and freedom of every individual. And it devolved down to lowest common denominator, simple, mindless entertainment. It is the bread in the Coliseum, keeping the masses at bay and not thinking about the issues that affect them every moment, which is why, if people are looking at my channel, I recently had a whole argument and a whole discussion about entertainers running for politics. And I'm like, I could care less. They're entertainers. Entertain. Don't step into politics. Not the same thing. We've devolved. But this is why we need these conversations. And I hope this is why people are watching us, and more people will continue to watch us here, because we're not just talking about guns. Look how this affects everything. They're
Right.
all connected.
Well, exactly. Okay, and that's why I challenge you. Okay, if your representatives, regardless of what level they're at, if your representatives are not asking the question, do we have the authority to? If they're not asking that question, then they're not representing you. They're looking to usurp power. They're not looking to represent you.
Yeah.
They're not looking to protect your rights. And in
Yeah.
order to protect your rights, and that is the first obligation of our representatives, is to protect our rights. That is their first obligation. It's not to enact laws or anything else. Their first obligation is to protect our rights. And if they're not asking that question, do we have the authority to? Then they should not be representing you, because they're not protecting your rights.
No, then it's a political agenda. And we see that all too common today, because they're assuming people will not take the time to either look it up for themselves or even have a conversation and ask a question of someone else and say, what do you think? Am I right? Do you know? And is there a resource so I can check for myself? And we've done that.
Exactly.
You know, we talked about Article 1, Section 8. We talked about the Eighth Amendment. We talked about this from many aspects, and then confirmed from there, went on to, well, what other things may fit into that same logic? See, this is the conversation we need to have, folks, on a national level regularly, because this
And
is
and
going
this
to,
is the conversation that we can have regardless of what our political ideologies are.
absolutely.
Okay? And that's the conversation that we need to be having, because both sides are extremely guilty of acting outside of their authority. Okay? And if we aren't asking the question, do they have the authority to enact whatever, to take whatever action? If we do not ask that question, then we are as guilty as they are of giving up our rights.
Jan just brought up a very interesting statement. A lot of these laws are now being introduced and passed so quickly, no one has time to go through the bills.
That's
And
true too.
And it's absolutely true. And we have to rail against that. And that, any politician, in my opinion, any politician who is trying to shove something through as fast as possible without giving you the chance to read it, to understand what it says, to even have deliberation amongst their colleagues, then that person is not looking out for your best interest. That law is not in your best interest, and we must oppose any such bill. That's what they did with the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act and put a dollar sign on the backs of Americans and commoditized denying people their Second Amendment rights. And there's a lot of bills we can say that. What was it? Was it Conyers very famously said about the Obamacare, ACA? It's a 2,000 plus page document. No one read it and no one had the time to read it, and it doesn't matter. And he voted to pass it anyway. We heard Nancy Pelosi famously say, or infamously say, that pass the bill to see what's in it. We can't let anyone who's doing that should be voted out of office, because that's not ever going to be in the best interest of any American, the Constitution, or our nation. It is always a political partisan benefit, and I would object to that. I don't care if they're Republicans, Democrats, Libertarians, Conservatives. I don't care who they are. If they don't want you to read the bill, that means it shouldn't be a law, period.
Exactly. Okay. And also, that's another requirement of the Constitution, and it's a requirement of state constitutions and local ordinances.
Mhm.
All laws must be written in a language that makes them easy for the common person to understand. And if a law is so complex that it takes 500 or 1,000 pages to be put forth, then the law is way too complex.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
Laws, how can we be held to account to a law that we can't understand?
How can we be held into account for a law that cannot be described without having 3 lawyers and 2 paralegals and probably a judge debating on its, not only its merits, but its inaction?
Mm-hmm.
You can't be held. If you can't understand, if no one understands what the parameters of the law are, how do you expect anyone to follow it?
Exactly.
And that's something.
And that's,
forget, we can
again,
question these things.
That's again where this isn't Congress falling down on the job. This is the American people falling down on the job. The American people not upholding their responsibilities.
Yeah, I agree completely. And that's why I wanted to bring it up, because there's so many levels, so much involved in this on so many levels that are so rarely ever discussed. And I'm so happy, and thank you, Mike, for engaging with me in this conversation and challenging me on this, because that's what we need. That's what we need. Same thing goes, and Jan, same thing, the same application here. If there is a candidate, again, I don't care what party, if they will not take the time to debate and allow the public to hear it, then they don't deserve to be elected, because they're not looking out for your best interest.
And here's the other thing, Jan. Even the minority party has the ability to stop action on any piece of legislation for debate. Okay. That is a requirement in the rules of both the House and the Senate, that ample time for debate. And if there is no time for debate, then they are violating their own rules.
Well, I think Jan's talking about it in terms of elections, or at least that's how I understood it. And so you're correct about having to debate on the floor of Congress, but at the same time, I would say the same thing about anyone as a candidate for any elected office. If they want debate,
That's exactly true too. Okay.
yeah,
If a candidate is refusing to debate their opponent, then why would you even consider electing that?
yeah. If that person is on the ballot, if they have been recognized by whatever community and they are on the ballot, I don't care what party they're in. They could be in the Green Party, which is the Communist Party of the United States. I could care less. If they are on the ballot, and there should be a debate. I don't care if this person is loopy or not. If they're on the ballot, they have the right, and the public, more importantly, actually, I would say, let me correct myself. There is an obligation of the candidates to ensure that they have a debate so the public can make the choice. I don't care if this person is projected to get 1%, 0.5%, 3 votes. If they're on the ballot, there should be a debate. Always.
Mm-hmm. And Jan says, I get that, but they're setting time limits. Yes, I've seen where they give every person that wants to make something. Okay. And part of that is to continue the business of the people. Okay. But there's also a deal where they can actually, the minority party, which has a minority party leader, has the authority to request more time. Also, every member is given that amount of time. So if they use it, they use it. They can also yield their time to another member. Okay. So that does give time for debate. Okay. Now, in the Senate, it's a little different than it is in the
House.
Okay. As in the House, because it has so many representatives and so many people in the House, they don't allow for these endless debates like in the Senate, where they do, okay, where they are able to allow for endless debates, okay, where they can essentially filibuster. And that's also one of the reasons why we have two houses. Okay, we have the House of Representatives, which is supposed to represent the people, okay, and the Senate, who's actually one of their primary roles initially before they changed over to being elected by the people was to actually take and slow down and take a closer look at the laws that were being put forth from the House. Okay. And then to thoroughly debate it and before it actually went to the president for their signature. I know the Senate has also enacted certain time constraints on some debates and so forth. However, they can still do filibusters. In other words, they can't stop debate unless there is a 2/3 majority vote to actually cause cloture to force it to a vote.
And to address your answer, Jan, when you're saying Jan, when you're saying that, oh well, we have a 2,000 page subject, and then they're only giving 2 hours. Again, that falls under the first thing. They're not talking. They don't want you to know what's going on. Again, those people should not be allowed to be reelected. They should be voted out of office. You don't need term limits for that. The public just needs to vote them out. Why? Because they did the same thing, as if they didn't speak about it, as if they didn't have a debate. It's the same thing. It's not giving you the opportunity to know what's going on. They're ramming it through. Another example is New York State. When they came up with the counter to the Supreme Court, they did that in 24 hours. In 24 hours, the rule subverting people's Second Amendment rights with these sensitive areas, that's stupid, and all the stupid requirements. You must affirmatively put out a sign to say that you would allow guns rather than it being an assumed thing. All of those stupid stipulations, that was done within 24 hours. They didn't let the public see it because they knew it's unconstitutional. People would object. They didn't give the public an opportunity, or even lawmakers an opportunity, to actually figure out what the consequences of it were, how it's going to negatively impact women and children and families trying to protect themselves, because police can't be everywhere all the time. So again, the answer to that is, if someone is rushing it through, it's not in your advantage. Vote them out. I don't care
Right.
what party they're in.
Exactly. Okay. And with the New York law, okay, they literally introduced it in the middle of the night
Yeah.
and passed it that same night.
Yeah.
Okay. Without any public debate, without any and in the state legislature, there is on most bills. Now, mind you, most time nobody puts in any opinion on it. But with most bills, there is time allotted for public comment.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The same happens at your local legislatures. That was not the case with this latest act or with the New York Safe Act.
Mm-hmm. Same thing. Yeah.
Okay. The same thing happened. And wasn't an emergency session of the legislature. I'm trying to remember what it's called.
I thought it
Here.
was the Safe
What's that?
Act. I thought the Safe Act was done under emergency.
No, there's
Session.
another term. They don't have such a thing as an emergency deal. What the hell is it?
Well, the latest one with Hochul was done under her executive powers, emergency powers, which is ridiculous. But I don't remember what Cuomo did it.
Yeah, there's a special session. Public necessity. That's what it was.
Oh, yes, yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay. They classified it as a public necessity, which gave them the authorization to enact this and bypass public comment.
Yeah. It's ridiculous. And again, it's an abuse of the public, using the heading, government's saving you. Government's going to protect you. The government's here to help, which is so abused. It's why it's such a joke now. Every time. And God help us, every time I hear that, I'm like, oh my God, you're about to screw me over. You're about to screw over the state. You're going to screw over the government of the country.
And the thing is whenever they enact any law in such a manner, we really need to question, did they even have the authority to enact that type of session? Okay. If we look at, supposedly this was passed due to public necessity. However, the
gun
law
law
that was passed wasn't actually enacted until months later. Okay. How can it be an emergent public necessity if the law doesn't go in effect until months later?
How can it be an emergent necessity, which means immediate, imminent, absolutely necessary now? This is something that's been going on. Crime has existed as long as human nature has existed. There have been gun crimes as long as there have been guns, going back to the 1500s, actually even the 1300s. This isn't imminent. It isn't a change of anything. Nothing has changed except that certain political objectives were no longer possible because the Supreme Court ruled it down. That's the only emergent and imminent nature of this, because nothing else changed. The crimes didn't change. The lawful use of firearms didn't change. They provided no data saying that concealed carry holders were any more dangerous than they had ever been in the past, which is the least dangerous.
Governor Hochul actually said she didn't care about the data.
I know, CBS News. She was covered by CBS News saying that it wasn't important. And that tells you right there, this isn't emergent, this isn't necessary, and makes that session absolutely illegal and should be thrown out. Because
Exactly. And the law should be thrown out.
No reason for it. Yeah.
Okay. And
I think
and other states do it too. Okay. I know California's done it. I know New York does it. Okay. All across the country does it. And the thing is we need to actually start saying no. You're no longer allowed to do that. This quote unquote crisis that you're trying to blow smoke up our ass about is not a crisis. How can it be a crisis if the law that you're passing under this emergency session doesn't go into effect until months later?
How can it be a crisis if it's something that already exists?
Right.
I mean, those are two simple arguments that tell you, well, is this constitutional, whether at state or federal level? Is it constitutional? Is this authorized? If the answer is nothing is different the day before and the day after, and it doesn't take place immediately, it takes place later down the road, it's not constitutional because you've abused your power, and therefore should not, the root of it is the abuse of power, therefore it's invalid. Start over. This isn't right. And if they're so right about these things, go through some regular process.
Until we start saying enough is enough, they are going to continue this. Okay? And we have literally been brainwashed as a society to believe that they have the authority to do this.
Yeah. Sure.
Okay? And they don't. They only have the authority that we give them. So start taking that authority back, putting it back in the hands of the people. Start pushing our representatives to actually represent us instead of representing their political agendas.
Yeah.
Okay. Quit buying into the hype of the political agendas and start looking at, are they really representing me or are they representing their party? And both parties, I don't care which party it is, both parties are guilty.
Yep.
And each is just as guilty as the other.
Oh, yeah. Just on different issues.
And when they are only representing the party, they're no longer representing us.
No, I agree with you completely, Mike.
Okay. And one other note on that. If they're only representing the party, they're only pushing to divide.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They're not pushing to bring us together. They're pushing to divide us. Because that is the whole function of political parties, is to divide us.
Yeah, yeah. And, well, we're seeing that weaponized currently. I mean, that's what Biden's doing right now. He's weaponized that in the most clear and universal way. And I know there's like 30% of independents and 20% of the 32% of the nation that say, oh, Biden did the right thing. No, he didn't. He polarized the nation. Polarization is division.
Mm-hmm.
It's meant to weaken the nation and to divide us and to, because we're divided, weaker. And that gives them more power. And
that right there is a key point that if you don't take anything else out of this from tonight, the key point is the more divided we are, the weaker we are as a country.
Yep.
Our country was built on unity. Hence, why we are called the United States, not the divided states, the United States of America.
Yep.
Okay. Our country was built on unification. Our country was built to be united, not to be divided. And as long as we are letting the parties divide us, we will continue and we will remain weak.
Yeah. Ultimately, yes. I agree. I think we covered it.
I think so.
Hmm.
Okay, with that, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up tonight's show. I do appreciate having Michael Vasquez with us tonight. As always, he offers a lot of commentary into the various topics that we are covering. And I am thankful for this last few minutes that we spent talking about the issues as such. Okay, starting off with that bill on the fentanyl and how we can actually look at a piece of legislation and determine whether or not we should actually be urging our congressman to support it or not to support it. How we can look at a piece of legislation, see if they even have the authority to enact such legislation. Okay, with that, I'm Mike Marshall, one of the co-founders of Liberty First Foundation. You can always find us here Friday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Time doing our live roundtable. The other place that you can always locate us is at l1f.us. That is our website. There we have numerous articles on the Constitution, gun reviews, and various other items on how you can get involved, how you can actually work on some of the things that we've discussed about being active. Okay, about what it really takes to be a citizen of the United States and a citizen of your community. Okay, you can also find us on YouTube at the Liberty First Foundation, and we also have gun reviews and other videos at the L1F Range Report on YouTube. You can also find us on Twitter. With that, we're going to go ahead and sign off. And we will see you tomorrow, off and on, throughout the day, celebrating Constitution Day. So be sure to hit the subscribe button and set up alerts so that you know when I'm coming on to talk some more about the Constitution. With that, we'll see you next week.